is a book dealer, one is a collector. Two are about collectors. So let's, in the interest of brevity, have a happy Hanukkah, have a happy holidays, and things should be good for everyone. Anyway, let's get to our story here right now. The first one is about Fabiola Alondra, who's a book dealer, fusing book smarts with art seamlessly. Fabiola Alondra, New York Times, Sunday, December 11th, 2016. Age 32, so hometown, Mexico City. Here she is. So now lives a duplex apartment in Brooklyn Heights, perched above the promenade, which she shares with her boyfriend, the photographer Balarama Hiller. Claim to fame: Fabiola Alondra is an art book dealer and gallerist whose resume includes stints cataloging illustrations for the painter Alex Katz and working closely with the print aficionado John McWhinney. Quote, "I love that you can combine art and books, and over time, I couldn't separate them," she said. Big break. After McWhinney died suddenly in 2012, Richard Prince plucked Ms. Alondra to head up Fulton Rider, his mysterious publishing hub and invitation-only bookshop. Quote, "It was exciting because Richard has one of the best book collections in the world," she said. Last March, she became the director of 303 in print. Last March, she became the director of 303 in print. We'll show this, and for anyone that is interested. A publishing imprint from 303 Gallery that commissions and produces limited edition print matter from the likes of Karen Kilimnik and Mary Heilman. "I think that all artists should make publications, whether they are very cheap zines or more elaborate books," she said. Latest project. After years of honing her book smarts under art world heavyweights, Ms. Alondra is now writing her own chapter. Here's a picture. This is an installation at Fortnight Institute in the East Village, which Ms. Alondra opened in April. Latest project. After years of honing her book smarts under art world heavyweights, Ms. Alondra is now writing her own chapter. In April, she opened Fortnight Institute, a space for contemporary and historical art, ephemera, and books on 60 East 4th Street in the East Village with Jane Harmon. The gallery's current exhibition features phallic works by 8 artists, including Oral Schmidt and Jesse Chapman. Quote, "We decided to focus on the male member, which still feels like a taboo," she said. Quote, "Is it stripping it from its power or putting it on a pedestal? We wanted to leave it open to interpretation." Next thing, her next project. This month, Fortnight Institute is publishing its first book, which will explore the current show's depictions of the male anatomy. Quote, "It's quite the topic, and there is so much there to talk about," she said. Black Magic. Her extensive home library, which has a built-in rolling ladder, is divided into literature, art, science, and a special section on the occult. Features include a recent book on the artist Tony Oursler, who has a regular trove of artifacts on the paranormal and other bizarre phenomena, and a first edition set of tarot cards from 1950s France. Quote, "Each card is beautifully hand-lettered in French with mordant captions," she said. Quote, the final letter for Lamond reads, if you have understood, you do not need my explanations. If you have not understood, you will never understand. Alex Howgood. Alex Howgood is the author of this. So this is Fabiola Alondra. She's a gallerist and a book dealer and book and art dealer. Fabiola Alondra. That's our first feature. Here we have another. She's a person that designs fashion, clothing. Angela Missoni, 58. Produces numerous collections for the Italian fashion house that bears her name, Missoni. At home on the outskirts of Milan, however, her collections are decidedly non-fashion. They comprise Provençal French ceramics, Italian glassware, 1950s porcelain poodles, and various tchotchkes unearthed from flea markets and second-hand stores around the world. This is her home over here. This is a picture of her collections. She focuses on hands. But of all the collections of objects, Ms. Missoni's favorite is a cluster of ornaments in the shape of hands, of which she has amassed hundreds. Here we have that picture. Over more than 30 years. She has amassed hundreds over more than 30 years. In a multitude of materials, sizes, and colors, the pieces overflow across many surfaces. They are hand-shaped trinket bowls and hand-shaped ashtrays. Clasped hands, originally given as wedding souvenirs, sit alongside palmistry figurines and photo-printed plates from the Italian brand Fornasetti. Quote, it's mostly a very kitsch collection, Ms. Missoni said. Quote, some of them are really only decorative, while others can be used to display jewelry or as paperweights or bookends. Ms. Missoni is also always on the lookout for them. Hunting for her next big hand is, she said, her biggest hobby. Quote, I'm a searcher, she said. Quote, I've been to flea markets since an early age. I was just a kid, but I never stopped. A trip to any city like Paris or New York automatically means scouring local flea markets, namely the Brooklyn Flea or the famed Le Possesse et Porte de Clignancourt. Le Possesse et Porte de Clignancourt. She admits that there is probably a reason she collects the hands. Quote, probably I love hands because they mean care. Probably I love hands because they mean care, Ms. Missoni said. I love hands because they mean work. I love hands because they are one of the most important ways of expression, besides mouth and eyes. Alexander Fury, the author. So here we have Angela Missoni. Angela Missoni in her home. And this is part of her collection of hands. She's a collector and a designer. We have another thing I happened to see. Another collector. He's an author, a novelist. This is Augusten Burroughs. He collects jewelry. Every gem has a story. There he is, Augusten Burroughs, holding a jadeite necklace at his home in Connecticut. For the writer Augusten Burroughs, quality jewelry can be as thrilling as a good book. by Alex Strauss. Southbury, Connecticut. I've loved jewelry my whole life, said Augusten Burroughs, the best-selling author whose most recent book, Lust and Wonder, a memoir, discusses his most important and romantic relationships, his fondness for jewelry being one. Quote, as a child I loved shiny things, he said. I would buy little silver rings with my allowance. I'd keep them in my pocket or put them on display in my room and stare at them. I loved looking at the intricacies of everything so elaborate in something so tiny. His paternal grandparents helped create his interest. My grandfather was a cough syrup salesman and went to China on business, Mr. Burroughs recalled. He would bring home jade for my grandmother. I loved looking at it and touching it. She was the one relative I was closest with, and so I associate jewelry and comfort with her. When he was 8, his grandfather gave him a 23-carat gold signet ring. I loved owning something someone had labored over, he said. There was an artistry and intent. It was portable, beautiful, and permanent. Today, Mr. Burroughs' collection comprises more than 200 pieces, many of them men's rings. Quote, I didn't buy anything expensive until I had money, which I got from my first advance for my novel, Television, in 2000. He said, I spent the entire amount on a ring I saw on display in the window of Cartier. It was a limited edition that was a kinetic sculpture of the earth, which unfolded and turned into a sphere. When I saw it, I knew I had to have it. It's one of the few pieces of jewelry I've ever bought new. Mr. Burroughs, 51, has boyish southern charm and green eyes, which on his particular day were set off by his pink Oxford and jeans. 8 other works have followed that first novel, 4 memoirs, 3 essay collections, and a self-help book, selling a total of nearly 10 million copies worldwide. Probably the best known is Running with Scissors, which in 2000 was made into a movie starring Annette Bening and Alex Baldwin. Although he became serious about collecting in 2002, 2008 is when it really ramped up, he said. Quote, I started finding and acquiring these pre-Georgian rings in onyx and malachite, which I loved. The more I learned about gemstones and gemology, the more it exploded for me. When it comes to the jewelry's composition, Mr. Burroughs favors jade, gems, and pearls, and he said he can spend up to 15 hours a day searching for an item online. This is not surprising, considering the lengthy list of guidelines he reeled off. Quote, if I'm buying a gemstone, it can't be treated. If I am buying a ruby, it can't be heated. It alters the color. And no substances can fill fissures in the stones. I want as natural and as unadulterated as possible. Grade A jade can only be waxed with beeswax, he added. Sapphires need to be earth-minded, and I'll only purchase pre-Mikimoto pearls. I'm not interested in Bulgari, Cartier, or vintage Van Cleef. Nothing mass-produced. I like handmade, one-off pieces. Here are some of his other rings that he has collected. Mr. Burroughs said that when he is under stress or on a book tour, he loves to prowl junk shops and estate sales from Maine to San Francisco for finds. While at a vintage shop in New England several years ago, he paid a few $100s for an Art Deco ring with a jade stone in a setting of base metal. Once he was home, he popped out the stone and put it in a 22-karat gold setting that he had designed. Quote, "The jade quality was spectacular," he said. "It was the perfect imperial emerald ring, and the person who sold it to me called it, quote, that green stone, which happens a lot. I'm fascinated by how people can miss something which I feel almost programmed to recognize. When I do, I get a physical reaction. It's a thrill paired with a sense of need and immediacy. I get goosebumps and a flushed feeling in my chest. My face gets hot. It's the recognition of something exquisite and extraordinary, like the feeling of seeing a unicorn in the woods." Another score happened 3 years ago in a junk store near Kettering, Ohio. It was December 24th, and Mr. Burroughs and his husband, Christopher Schelling, were shopping for last-minute Christmas gifts. Quote, "I spotted these white plastic beads, quote-unquote plastic beads in the counter," he said. "The instant I held them in my hands, there was no hesitation. The beads, marked at $17, were flawless angel skin coral, white with a soft blush of pink. Hundreds of people walk into that store every day, and there they were, lying next to rhinestone clip earrings and a gaudy red plastic necklace." Mr. Burroughs said, "Christopher thought they were plastic. I know he was thinking, why is he buying this? But now he's been trained. I told him what they were the minute we walked out of the store." There are two pieces of jewelry Mr. Burroughs does not take off. One is a finely carved three-sided emerald jade necklace from the 1920s that he found while sleuthing in New Hampshire. The other is his wedding ring, a mid-century marquise-cut diamond in a setting that resembles the decor of the Chrysler Building. For a serious storyteller like Mr. Burroughs, it's no surprise he views his rings as having a similar role. Each has history, energy, and, most important, narrative. With each owner, with each time they wore it, a little piece of their soul attached itself to this highly personal, exquisitely beautiful item, he said. Quote, "I love the stories that seep into these vintage rings over time by the previous owners. I like to think about who wore them. Marriage, a new book, and a move to a calm country lifestyle has slowed things down for Mr. Burroughs, whose readers know his early years were filled with anxiety, addiction, and affliction. Jewelry has been a constant. It still is. Quote, growing up, I had a very ugly and turbulent past," he said. "There were a lot of fractured and jagged edges with no stability, and being able to carry around or wear something beautiful and perfect is somehow reassuring. It proves these things exist in the world." Clockwise from top, Mr. Burroughs' turquoise, emerald, and chrysoberyl rings. So this is the collection of Mr. Burroughs. Here we have the author, Augusten Burroughs, holding a jadeite necklace in his home in Connecticut. We also have here Angela Missoni, the fashion designer, with her collection of hands. She's Ms. Missoni is an avid collector of hands, all kinds of hands. And whenever she's at a flea market, she goes and she searches out for the latest finds that she can get. And we have here Fabiola Alondra. The book, she's an art gallerist and book dealer, and she started her own gallery, and also started printing her own books about art. So there we have it. There we have it, what we have. And so it's very interesting. I thought this was a rather interesting, a lot of different collectors and dealers of various items that they find interesting. And we hope you will enjoy it and like it. And thank you very much for watching. And it's always nice when someone subscribes. And it's always good to have people here. Thank you very much. Take care.